Days of Shrovetide are coming to a close and Lent will soon be upon us. So I wanted to talk about a few ways that we can give our home a more penitential atmosphere during the season of sacrifice. If you're new to our show, I'm Jenny Shaw coming to you from our little domestic monastery, Barefoot Abbey, and I am so glad you are here joining us today, seeking out ways to live out the liturgical year with your family. So first, I want to talk a little bit about Lent as a season. Historically, following Shrovetide Confession, it was a time when personal penances were fulfilled before the Easter Triduum. And even today, the church sets this time aside for us to tithe a tenth of our time, a tenth of the year, and reorder our affections back to Christ, unite our efforts with this sacrifice, and use it as a period to ready our souls for the celebration of the resurrection, which is the biggest festival feast of the church year. So this is a big deal. In other more practical terms, during Lent, we're called to detach from vice and to cultivate virtue. That's really the easiest, activity, the main focus there, and way that we can grow closer to Christ during Lent. And Lenten penance is traditionally enacted through prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. And these three practices also show that dichotomy just mentioned, and what our penance should reflect. So through fasting, we're called to plow the fields of our souls and remove those distractions and the occasions of sin. And we do this by denying ourselves food or, other spiritually damaging habits. So just, anything that basically is a distraction from our main purpose of Christ. At the same time, and this is according to Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas, we must replace that void that the vices leave with the seeds of good habits of virtue. So we're working on things that are going to take the place of those not so good choices that we make sometimes. We can't just leave, a vacuum there. That's a great Aristotle quote. Nature abhors a vacuum. There has to be something filled in, or there won't be a lasting change. And that's what we want. We want the growth to stay. We want it to be something that each year we're building on, and not just going back to square one, on Easter Day, when whatever we give up may come back. That's another discussion that we can have about, what should we give up? Should it be something that returns at the end or not, or things like that? But that's for another day. Specifically, when we're talking about what we are giving up and things like that, we're talking about the temptations, and that's one side of the coin on the penance. On the other side, specifically, we can take up our crosses with Christ by taking up practices like prayer and almsgiving, and then other pious disciplines during Lent. So those are the two sides. And that being said, how we can adjust the everyday atmosphere of our homes to remind our families of the penitential purpose of Lent and encourage their growth in virtue is really our main focus today. And here are a few things that our family does that we want, to have in place, that we want to have as part of our liturgy of life, to help us remember that, okay, we need to be, trying to do the harder things this time of year. So the first thing that we do is we replace our secular music that we listen to with sacred music. So I've got several different resources for that. And, whether it's, music appreciation lessons on the Stabat Mater. I've got a couple hymn studies that your family can work with during those weeks of Lent. And then also our daily Lenten calendar that's based on a piece of music each day, just kind of to act as a reminder to kind of set the tone for that time. Another thing that we do, and this is more getting into food and meals and things like that, is that mirroring the altar during Lent, we don't have fresh flowers or plants, things like that, on our dining table. So if we have, roses in the yard, things like that, we either, just leave them, let them be, take them as an act of service to somebody in need, or things like that. So we don't use them for our own personal, beautification of the home. Another thing is our meals are very austere during this time. We do a lot of simple soups and salads, and just, like condiments and things like that. We try to hold off on that and really just limit that, and have that be a time or a thing that we can, offer up as a sacrifice. Desserts are also saved for solemnities. So there's usually most years 2 solemnities, and that's St. Joseph and then the Annunciation. So we take advantage of those if we remember, and if we have it in the house, things like that. And then another thing kind of related to that is on days of fasting, we have little sanctities, and that's just something to help cement those days of fasting in our children's minds. And we have different, special plates we'll use, or we'll do things like that. It's not necessarily like special food, because it's just the one large meal of the day, and then the 2 collations that don't add up to that larger meal. But it's just a way to have that be something memorable for them, and not just as sad or feel like they're as deprived, as children. So that's the food things. Another really, really easy thing you can do is at night after dark, use candles or just very little light, and have that just to be a reminder of Christ's time in the desert. So the last couple things, TV is further limited in our home during Lent, and we have instead, so as a replacement, we have a weekly Lenten family movie night. And, that can be anything like Prince of Egypt, or, just the related types of films during this time. And so on Good Friday, we have the Passion of the Christ. So all my children watch that. I know there is some different views on that. We don't want to hide what, Christ went through and the sacrifice that he made from them. I think, especially as boys, our oldest is 9, I feel that they can comprehend that, and they should know the gravity of that sacrifice, and that the Passion of the Cross, or the Passion of the Christ film, shows that in a way. Some parts I do fast forward through, the parts that weren't in the Bible necessarily, his artistic license in there, that doesn't really affect it, but the rest is there for them. And then we also encourage them to wear like a little bracelet of sacrifice beads. We haven't made them for this year yet, but they're just like little pony beads, and they can move across the bracelet itself, and there'll be a gap. So each time they make a personal sacrifice, then they can move the beads over and see how many were done in the day. And that's really a great way to have them keep track of their own personal sacrifices, but still keep in line with the idea that you're not sharing that or bragging about them to everyone in the family and things like that. So, just reminding them that their treasures are stored up in heaven and not to seek rewards on earth for that. Lastly, praying the Stations of the Cross at home. I've got a little booklet y'all can have for that. And that's about it. That's all I have for you today. Please be sure to share the ways your family creates a more penitential home for Lent in the comments. And until next episode, just keep living out your faith each day, one feast, fast, and Feria at a time.